Last Star Standing is basically escapism. It feels much more like action-adventure or a straight thriller than science fiction. It's set in the near future, 2094, and follows an alien invasion, so it has to be marketed as sci-fi, but it's really about the narrator's tough, terrifying but ultimately life-affirming personal journey. This book ambushed me about 3 years ago. I was meditating, something I do very badly. But despite this, I've had several great experiences when I try. Swirling colours come to me, images, ideas, and in this case, a character. I was looking down from the Earth's surface, about 100 metres through a metallic shaft, at a young man imprisoned in a metal chair. It was Aiden, my narrator, and from that first, bizarre introduction, he pursued me, even pestered me. With sinking heart, I realised that he was asking me to write science fiction, about which I knew almost nothing. A crazy idea. Every time it returned, I pushed it away. But Aiden fought back. He wanted the book to happen. He wanted it to be. And, long story short, because he wouldn't give in, he persuaded me. Today, Last Star Standing will be published. If you read it, I hope you enjoy it. And if you enjoy it, I hope you review it. But most of all, in these tough times, I hope that it really does offer at least a little escape. Aiden has been dragged along by the crowd into witnessing an assassination of a fellow rebel, a beautiful mermaid-like alien called Lilac. He is armed, but can't decide what his course of action should be. To assassinate the presiding androgynous leader of the regime, his duty, though he had been Aiden's sole friend in prison, or to give Lilac a chance at freedom. She has been released into a gigantic tank containing the famous creature and has only moments to live. I should have been reassured. Instead, I felt clammy and weak. What if it didn't work? What if it failed and I was wiped out, without taking a single tester with me? I tugged my gaze from Lilac to MF, his expression unreadable. Inside its great tank, the creature skirted around restlessly, in constant movement, now in view on one side, next, presumably, in view on the other. Its eyes were smoky, orangey red, its tail ridged with spikes like tiny razors. Each tooth, even the smallest, was the size of a quadrupod. But it wasn't only the fact that Lilac was about to follow the giant octopus and her glowing brother down this massive mouth that chilled me. MF had been my only friend in prison. Could I really kill him? Because I couldn't imagine how a creature of such mass could possibly swim. And what about the bystanders? Most of them sounded like disaster zones, but I hadn't interviewed them individually. I could become, in the space of the next few seconds, a mass murderer. A mass murderer who had sworn a decade ago to protect and defend my innocent fellow creatures in the name of the rebellion. I passionately longed to give Lilac a chance, but wasn't impulsivity one of the things I was supposed to fight? "Why do you keep doing that?" demanded the woman behind me, and I realised that I'd been stroking the hidden weapon obsessively. But who else, out of the 100,000 present, had the chance to do any bloody thing? God's idea of a joke that it should be me. Meanwhile, they were moving Lilac to the top of the tank. There was an annoying ooh as the pulley wavered, weaving her between the glass like a child figurine, like a mermaid keyring. MF was talking to a tester, slightly adjusting that strange ornament at his throat. Had his voice really altered? And wasn't it most likely that the projectile would simply bounce off the structure? Suddenly I wished that someone, even Martin, was there, just to take the burden of decision-making off my shoulders. "Just hand me the gun and tell me where the fuck to aim it!" Lilac had dived into the tank without fanfare. Presumably she could only breathe air for a brief period, and indeed seemed to gain luminosity on contact. I watched, in what were probably her last moments, her colouring altered with the light. Her face the frailest gilt pink, her hair a shiny ripple of gold. Each of these colours was gradually strengthening, as if the water was renewing her. And suddenly I realised that I'd made my decision, and watched MF for a sign. I also spot-checked the creature. Rapturously full, it appeared in sportive mood, showing no interest in the glowing little shape following the octopus's trajectory to the bottom of the tank. Instead, it splashed and dashed, even snapped at the side of the tank, as if disconsolate at being stuck between glazed walls. I felt almost sorry for it. Had it asked to be made so huge, so spectacular, so ravenous? It was as imprisoned as the rest of us. Still, those jaws. There was a collective intake of breath as the creature swirled past Lilac, that lethally spiked tail close to her poised little face. She sat composedly on the bottom of the tank, by comparison the size of a doll, though entirely returned to her element. Was she really amber-coloured? Or was there a more gilded sheen? The crowd was silenced, mesmerised, and every camera extended greedily towards the tank, waiting to gather her in. It was time. I picked a place as close to the centre as possible. There could be a structural weakness there. If it gave her just half a chance. I took one last glance at MF, pressing something at the centre of his new bauble, and felt suddenly certain, with an uprush of gratitude, that he wasn't the MF I knew. He'd either been turned, or else corrupted. The MF I was about to murder was no longer ours. The creature made 2 swift passes, the second accidentally pushing Lilac into the crushed gravel with one careering pull of that gigantic tail. It was only as she righted herself that it seemed to notice her for the first time. It halted at the top of the tank, baring those pod-sized teeth. Did it simply fancy a chance to play? It was preparing to plunge downwards, was all I knew. I pulled the trigger. I was disappointed in the first millisecond. It was so nearly soundless, but all the new ones are, and I hadn't had an upgrade for ages. Then the power of the recoil shoved my entire body backwards. Amid a deafening cacophony of screams and yells, I watched the gap in the tank yawn open, its sides unfolding like gigantic origami, while the gush, rush, slush of seawater turned, within a couple of seconds, into a great rolling torrent, sweeping up the whole of the audience in one effortless surge. Salt water. Aiden has arrived at the regime's army encampment on a mission to assassinate the king. For the purpose, he's been transformed into a tester, a bull-like humanoid. However, instead of the king, Ravine, the king's chosen heir, appears. It's crucial to know that Aiden and Ravine had been together a decade before, but he's now in love with Petra. But it wasn't the king, after all. Instead, a canopied carrier appeared, and on it a patient, waxen, though still stunning, her irises precisely bisected, her brilliantly lit hair haloing her pillow. My first love was before me, impulsive, impetuous, imperious, though always faithful in her fashion. There she was, to make it worse, wounded, the half-human I'd always cared about more than I'd admitted. For all these reasons, as I knelt, there could be no more messed-up tester than me. Languidly she gazed at us. She suddenly said, "Wait, and which are you?" Publicity I could do without. And I, half glancing round, half rising, could only query, "Lady?" because there was nothing to distinguish me from the others. OK, one tester might have a rather higher hairline, another slightly burlier shoulders, but believe me, we were all testers, visually speaking, an acquired taste, though I couldn't help wondering might Ravine have acquired it. "Attend me," she murmured. The suspicion of my fellow testers was brutal. I was bumpily escorted by about 6 of my fellows. Inside the chamber, a hastily slung-up tent, the princess's litter was lowered, while servants rushed to provide her with delicacies, including tangerines, avocados, roasted artichokes, and several imports from some other planet which I couldn't put a name to. One offered her some drink, which appeared partly alive. I had to force my eyes away as its movement dizzied me. Then she fixed untranslatable eyes on my face. "Strangely," she said, "I feel that I know you, Horvel." She was calling me underling. "Lady." The look of black hatred from some of the other testers was so threatening that Ravine ordered them to depart. Then I said, "Lady, I am true to your father. May he live forever." Ravine shifted into a sitting position and flinched. She spoke almost to herself, as if I was too stupid to understand. "You're ugly, of course, but then you're all ugly. But there's something different about you. You remind me of someone I knew years ago," she continued. "He was human, good-looking, not stunningly good-looking, but still handsome, well-built, clever, amusing. Tenten was his name. You might have heard of him. He was recently executed." As some answer seemed expected, I rasped, "A known rebel, a known traitor, lady." "A traitor to us, perhaps, but utterly true to his own people. You must realize that I am part human." I knew all this, of course. Whether most testers would have, I hadn't a clue. I stood in the approved tester pose, staunch, wooden, dull. Ugly too, I bet. Perhaps that's why I remember him so warmly. Of course he was impulsive, stubborn, in some ways difficult, but his humanness somehow spoke to me. I've never since... She lapsed back into thoughtfulness, while I kept wondering why the hell she was telling me this. He had such feelings. Everything with Aiden was always so wonderfully in the moment. There was a time, I remember, we were on a balcony. Oh God, I remember that too. Almost fell off the bloody thing. I shifted uneasily as she said almost dreamily, and then another time. We were on a picnic with other students. It was autumn in the overland, and somehow one could still sense it, even deep below. Perhaps some movement in the air, some atmosphere, some sense of leaves being trodden, decayed into the dark earth. Aiden and I drifted away from the others. We'd been dancing. Did I mention the music? But why on earth am I telling you this? Search me. But beneath both my hammering hearts, I was still bewitched. That rainbow-textured sky, that music, that day. Sternly I attempted to think of Bully, of any bloody thing, just to break the spell. This didn't work. Instead I was caught up in remembering. Ravine casting her gaze backwards in the academy corridor. Ravine waiting in the disabled loo, hair almost rapturously dishevelled. Ravine winning the badminton tournament with that perfected eye. I tried to remember Petra, but she lacked vitality in comparison. It was as if Ravine had tossed diaphanous silks over everything that wasn't ourselves. Young and handsome, young and full of hope, young and full of glory, the way the young are. She sighed, stirred, and continued, "We left the others, just the two of us. Oh, I don't suppose you understand for one single second what I'm talking about. But luckily you're far too stupid to understand. At any rate, we left the others under the great canopy of false sky, and above it there was a crack, and through it, like a gift, a slice of real sky. And he took me just there, under that." She'd been gazing into the distance. She glanced over at me and wriggled discontentedly. "What an apish expression you all have!" As for me, I was still trying to look the dimmest test going. "Lady, just tell me what to do," I growled as politely as I was able. "Command me. A drink and an attendant." She half rose on her elbow, staring at me. Both of my hearts stopped. "Say that again?" I glowered, with any luck apishly. "A drink, an attendant, you may command?" "Aiden, it is you." I retreated, my heart leaping like a pair of racing trout. "Lady." "Come here," she ordered, as every atom in my body tugged me towards her. "Closer." I obeyed. She smelled like the sea. My soul, my shining, youthful soul, glowed in those bisected eyes. She said, "It is you. It is." I recalled Bully, Pavlina, the vow I had made to Sebastian. I also remembered Martin's orders. No going off-piste, no fucking the princess. I said desperately, "Lady, I am Technior, Satellite 532, Lieutenant of Amber 421. And then, as loudly as my ratcheted tones would carry, "The princess is faint and mistakes me for human scum. Assistance! Assistance!" Why nobody heard? Why nobody came, I'll never know.